Just be happy with who you are. Just be happy with who you are. Just be happy with who you are.
Hi, and now we're going to look at theoretical perspectives. This is part 2. So, many factors, including biological, psychological, social, and environmental, involve the development of mood disorders. Now, one element that's strongly related to depression is that of stress. Research indicates that there is a robust and causal association between stressful life events. That could be things like getting married, getting divorced, loss of a loved one, the additional bills that we have to pay as we get older. It could be any number of these sort of normal, not always anticipated life events. And these stresses, now you have to remember, stressors aren't necessarily all bad, but stress. Stressful life event, major depressive episodes. Major depression is often preceded by stressful events. Although not everyone who experiences such events will become depressed. I mean, like I mentioned in the introduction, we may have broken up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and we may have a period of sadness, but we do tend to get over that and get back into the game, if you will, spend time with our friends, engage in all those other activities that brought us enjoyment, and still be able to enjoy them. Stressors such as loss of a loved one, prolonged unemployment, physical illness, marital or relationship problems, economic hardships, pressures at work, racism, discrimination may all contribute to the development and reoccurrence of mood disorders, especially major depression. It's also thought that depression will have an effect of personal stress levels or sources of stress. So this week we're going to look at the theoretical perspectives of how they view the sources of depression. And we're going to start with the psychodynamic perspective. And we'll start with this in terms of the classical psychodynamic theory. In classical psychodynamic theory, depression is viewed in terms of inward directed anger. Now, most of us will process through the mourning of a loss of a family member or a friend in a relatively normal manner, eventually separating ourselves from the loss, a death or separation or divorce. Pathological mourning is when people hold strongly to these ambivalent feelings, both strongly positive, like love, and strongly negative, like anger toward the people that they've lost, or whose loss is threatened, may direct unresolved anger toward inward representations of the people they have incorporated or interjected within themselves, producing a self-loathing or depression. And that's sort of the classical direction of psychodynamic. Now, bipolar is understood within psychodynamic theory in terms of shifting balances between the ego and the superego. More recent psychodynamic models, such as the self-focusing model, incorporate both psychodynamic and cognitive aspects in explaining depression in terms of continued pursuit of lost love objects or goals that would be more adaptive and beneficial to surrender. Now, the learning theorists, now you could group them as learning and behavioral perspective, focuses on situational factors in explaining depression, such as changes of the level of reinforcement. When reinforcement is reduced, the person may feel unmotivated and depressed, which can lead to inactivity and further reduction of opportunities for reinforcement. So Coyne's interactional theory focuses on the negative family interactions that can lead family members of depressed people to become less reinforcing to them. Now, a cognitive perspective looking at depression is they relate the origin and maintenance of depression to be the ways in which people see themselves and the world around them. Now, Beck's cognitive theory focuses on the role of negative or distorted thinking in depression. Now remember, cognitive is about thinking, so they're looking at that in order to get clinically depressed, we must have distorted or in some way negative thinking patterns. We cycle through it. Depression-prone people hold negative belief towards themselves, the environment, and the future. They don't see something in the future as turning out very positively, and that the things around them, the environment, the people, the circumstances, aren't very positive for them. This cognitive triad of depression leads to specific errors in thinking, or cognitive distortions. In response to negative events, that in turn lead to depression. Now, you can find a list of cognitive distortions in your textbook. A researcher and psychologist, Martin Seligman, in 1975, he developed a concept known as learned helplessness model, and it's based on the belief that people may become depressed when they come to view themselves as helpless to control reinforcement in the environment or to change their lives for the better. The reformulated version of the theory holds that the ways in which people explain events, their attributions, determine their proneness towards depression in the face of negative events. The combination of internal, global, and stable attributions for negative events renders one of the most vulnerable for depression. Now, in all of these, you'll find that they take a slightly different tack, but they take a consistent alter or direction for support. The biological approach is looking at genetics, and their argument is genetics appears to play a role in mood disorders, especially in explaining major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. Imbalances in the neurotransmitter activity in the brain appear to be involved in depression and mania. In particular, norepinephrine and serotonin in depression, in twin and adoptive studies, have added strength to this theory, the heredity factor. And that's an important part, is what role does heredity play? So tying this together, if you remember, the interactionalist perspective, known as the diathys stress model, is used as an explanatory framework to illustrate how biological or psychological diathys causes, if you will, may impact, or vulnerabilities, may impact, interact with stress in a development of depression. Psychological and biological vulnerabilities lead to depression. The psychological vulnerabilities would be either past unconscious argument between the superego and the ego, or it could be our distorted thinking, where the biological could be more genetic and hormonal and neurotransmitter based. The vulnerabilities lead to depression in the presence of particular stressors, like stress factors such as unemployment, divorce, pressing socio-cultural factors. Potential protective factors such as coping resources and social support can protect forms of depression, while the lack of these protective factors can be aggravate depression quite significantly. All right, that's the theory's perspectives. Next, what we'll be looking at treatment based on those theoretical perspectives. We'll see you in part 3. All right, bye now.